We're at the School of Arts and Communication that started out in 98 as a kind of digital Bauhaus, we called it that time. And the research group here, where we are at the Media Lab, is basically focusing on design and social change, typically with grassroots organizations or NGOs. When we started in 98, we produced a manifesto for a digital Bauhaus, and with the idea of getting beyond the hype of IT, which was very strong at that time, and looking more into social environmental issues of the design process, typically working with a collaborative design approach and highlighting questions of democracy and participation.
I mean, Malmö is considered by many, and it is quite segregated city, and it's huge differences in health between different areas of the city. So that's one problem that we work with. But maybe what's most important for us is actually who defines the problem. Is it us, the researchers? Is it the politicians? Or is it the people? So we really try to get the citizens involved also in defining the problems. For example, here at the university where it's located, we have many ICT companies, media industry, newly built living area that's really ecological. People have good salaries, they have jobs and so forth. But other areas of Malmö are not considered to be that wealthy. So we actually started our work in those areas. But then what we try to do is actually to connect very different citizens, stakeholders, bring them together, find joint possible experiments and so forth. This is actually not our laboratory. It is actually the city that's our laboratory, because we really try to work out among the people. So when we meet an NGO, for example, we spend a lot of time in their facilities, trying to understand what they do, how their everyday activities potentially could make sense in social innovation, how they potentially might be connected to other stakeholders. And then we do a lot of the experiments out there among the people.
I mean, it's one thing with society at large and the Democratic Foundation, but we need lots of other small ways of enhancing a democratic society. And what happens with that is that you often run into conflict with business as usual. If you're not producing a number of new jobs defined as wage labor, or if you do not produce a number of companies understood as companies producing profit, if you do not live up to that kind of expectations, if you instead are working with important work for people, new ways to collaborate, etc., that is not seen in the same way as society as success stories of design and innovation. And we want to highlight that kind of stories instead.
One important thing is that it's beside working with NGO and grassroots organizations, it's trying to connect to structures like the public sector and understand how it might be possible to change the way the public sector works to sustain these initiatives on a long run. So very big part of our work is also this continuously trying to have a dialogue with the municipality, for example, here in Malmö, with different civil servants, and try to understand what kind of alternative way of operating could be in regarding to their work and how this way of working could support these initiatives.
You could say that. I mean, quite early it turned out that when we were working with a lot of grassroots and also with connecting them to ICT companies, and we developed and they developed together solutions that seemed very, very promising. But then after a while we could see that these solutions, they didn't really fit the overall system. So then we had to think, okay, what can we do now? Because everyone in the group, everyone in the community, so this could be good. But then we also need to change, as Anna says, the way municipalities operate. So then we have also established this kind of ongoing dialogue, and also do kind of friendly hacking of the public sector, with the hope of maybe change the bigger system as well in the future.
Because one thing that really characterizes our way of operating this long-term commitment and long-term collaboration with these external actors. So even if we use words such as experiments and laboratory, it doesn't mean that we go out, do some kind of intervention and then go away. We try to stay with the stakeholders and see how the activities we initiate together or the connections that we create, how they can live further, how they can be sustainable on a long run. And this means that you have this really long and also slow processes. It's not about often finding a quick fix, but rather explore how these constellations, new practices, new way of working which are emerging can live further. And then you meet with different kinds of constraints coming, for example, from policy, from the way, for example, social innovation is financed today, where you have a lot of funding coming from starting up projects. But then the issue is what happens after the first 2-3 years where you get some financing. How do you go on there? And what kind of possibilities are for continuing activities? And this is how and why we try to work a lot with the public sector. And this really often it's slow and frustrating kind of process where you try continuously to...
So you could also say that, I mean, the social innovations per se might be important, but what we have seen is also that the learnings and the capacity that are built by working together and bring these different groups together, that sometimes that's worth much more, because a specific innovation, next year it might not work anymore, but the capacity we build by bringing these groups together and jointly do this experiment makes it possible for them to come up with a new innovation, next year and next year. So I think it's very important, this kind of bringing these different groups together and all the learning that takes place.
It's always a question of building up long-term relations of trust. It's never a quick fix. We can do workshops, yes, but that's not what it's all about. It's about building relation, trying to find out possible futures together with different actors. So it's a much more long-term. A project is never enough. So that's why we're talking about a structure where we engage over time and try to link different actors. It's not important that we are the central actor. It is more important that other actors get in touch with another and form their futures. So even if we're known of being kind of experts in participatory design and doing workshops and prototypes, etc., that's only a minor part of it. That's always embedded in the long-term engagement.
I mean, although you find a lot of toolkits within the design world, when we go out and meet these communities, it turned out quite quickly that we can't just bring a smart workshop format where we have design tools. Actually, the starting point is quite mundane, having quite simple meetings, drinking tea together, try to understand what they do, they get to know us, building a common repertoire of opportunities. Also, I mean, ethnography is very important in design, but several of these stakeholders have said that they don't want us to study them. They don't want us to go there and look at them. So a lot of the traditional design tools and practices were not possible to use, at least not initially. One reason is that if you as a designer develop a specific design game or something, that's a kind of specific language. You need to know how to operate that and work with it. And you can't just impose that on all these groups and think that they will, play your game. You need a way to meet them, equally to start with. And also, it have been so many projects in these areas since like 30 years back. And it have been so many researchers going there and studying these people. And they don't want, to have more researchers coming just to study them. So actually when we started, a lot of people were skeptical. Do you want to study us again? No, we're tired of that. They wanted to collaborate on as equal terms as possible.
What we're interested in, it's in this long-term engagement. It's not to prove that we are good designers. And then if we are there for establishing this long-term engagement, it means that when we meet the different stakeholders, then it needs to be discussed what's the better way to go here, in which way we can find a way to make these possible futures. And that's not necessarily design. It could be other ways of doing things in which we contribute with a designerly approach and way maybe of thinking. But it's not about toolkits and methods, and it's more this way maybe of acting and exploring potential futures. And this is what we bring. But it's not us setting up the agenda, because what we are interested in is in creating these long-term relationships. And then you need that the other actors feel ownership and commitment towards developing these things together.
I think this is crucial. I think doing this kind of design, as you say, maybe the most important is to have a specific mindset, a specific attitude, being quite, as Pelle say, humble, being quite open-minded to what do these people want to do. Not that we bring in our tools quickly, not that we set up the frames quickly. Rather go there, be very open-minded, and then act upon what they bring on the table. And then navigate continuously depending on what they see as an opportunity, what they state as important for them. So I think it's very much a kind of, I guess, a specific personality. And it's quite hard. It's quite tough also, because it's very uncertain situations. It's quite complex. It's hard to prepare sometimes also for these encounters. You need to be able to navigate on the spot.
I mean, one thing is the attitude, but I think it's an attitude that is cultivated over a long time, meaning that I can, for instance, see that designers who are trained as industrial designers, Anna, they can do certain things that are very different from someone that has taken a quick course on design thinking. Design thinking about the worst thing that's happened to design, because it focuses so much on the quick fix and the concept, and so little on the preparing to be ready to act with your designerly skill in a specific situations with all the contingencies of that situation. So I think if there is a lesson, there is to prepare, and that take years.
And also, I don't think somehow. I think it's still about a design practice, because I don't want to simplify it, but I see it connections with my previous practice as an industrial designer, where you are there in a situation which is a project. Let's say you need to build a furniture, and then you have different technologies which are involved, people who knows about different kinds of way of doing things, you have materials, you have different kinds of knowledge, and then what you do is that you explore what's possible to do, and it's about this specific situation. And it's, of course, maybe you have methods and tools that you might use, but sometimes it's often about what specific constellation do you have right there at that time. And here I think it's the same. So it's more this attitude of how do I come in a situation and explore what is possible to do here.
And I think it's also very important to be extremely respectful of all kind of people and professional roles and so on, and be able both to meet civil servants, politicians, people in different communities, business people. And I think that's really crucial.
When I did my first project on this kind, working in a factory that were repairing locomotives, and the average age of the workers there was 55 years, and I was in my late 20s, and we worked with the local union, and we wanted to have a project where people really wanted to do this, and it had to do with how to change technology at the workplace. So the local union called this meeting, and they voted for the project. And at this meeting, we did a very nice presentation we thought of about what was the possibilities for collaboration and what could we do and how do we look at technology. 6 months down the lane, and this was the first project, over a couple of beers when we were sitting and having a meeting, they were asking, do you know why we let you guys in? Yeah, we wanted to know that. And they're saying that, well, we didn't understand shit about what you were saying, but you seemed like nice guys, so we thought we'll give you a chance. Either you have that talent or you develop it over the years, but it's something about meeting people and create also some empathy the other way that makes it possible for you to start to work together.
But it's also, as Per Anders was saying, it's also a lot about being able to listen and not starting already with an idea about what you're going to do, but really going out and meet and try to understand what is the stakeholder, what's their role, what's their concerns, what's their interests. I think that's really fundamental.
It takes a long time to learn that, and you need to meet all these different communities and people from different sectors in society many times to learn how to do this. And then you also need to be very flexible in the way you talk, what protocols you set up for a discussion, and sometimes you can use traditional design tools, sometimes you cannot.
Design for social innovation has two fundamental problems, and one is social and the other is innovation, in the sense that we totally disagree upon the social, in the sense that for some the social is just the humans. To us it's very much the idea of changed practices which involve conflicts between different actors that you have to overcome, and it's not only the people, it's the buildings, it's the streets, it's all of this, and it is controversial. We do not agree on the social, that's one thing. The second thing is that we definitely don't agree on innovation. If innovation means business as usual, that means growth, progress, a new technological gadget, etc., then that's not, I guess, the kind of business we're in. We're more into maybe small but important steps that people make in their everyday. Maybe it's not even a new job, maybe it's not a new company, but some changed practices where people's capacities can grow. And maybe it doesn't show up on any of the given measurements we have on success. Given a very good word for what I think we're involved in. We're involved in melancholic design in the sense that we make small steps forward, but there's always a backlash. But the good thing about it, and this is the Nordic understanding of melancholy, is that we don't give in. We still have hope. Then we try something else again, and maybe come on. So it's never the great success stories, but there's this more modest melancholic design. It's not that bad, actually.
We try to get beyond the terminology of, I mean, as Pelle says, it's problematic with both social and innovation. And actually, a lot of civil servants, for example, they know we have been doing this stuff for our whole life, and now you come with these fancy words. Stop. So I mean, also design is a problematic word. And now we talk much more about reflective practice with civil servant, coming from Donna Schön once, that actually all practitioners have used reflective practice to navigate in everyday problems, all uncertain problems. You can't solve them with standard methods. Then you need a reflective practice to solve or deal with these uncertain situations and complex problems. And a lot of these people, they recognize the idea of reflective practice, but they can say, no, we don't want fancy design or... so we try to be pragmatic, and we try to get beyond the terminology as much as we can. Then sometimes it makes sense to talk about social innovation, and we have it on our webpage because other people, they also do social innovation. So sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes we need to, put it in the background.
I don't know what's exactly to be done, but I think there is this personally, this how to create some kind of new connections between what is emerging from the bottom up and the role of the institutions of the state, how the state can become a way to support these initiatives and create this cohesion.
When you really sit down for a couple of hours with some of these people that are marginalized or in a community that are, unemployed people, you realize that they have a huge capacity. Even if you also hear that they will never get a job. And when you really realize that, then you can see potential. If we can bring out all of these small examples, these mundane, everyday things, I think that, that would be growth, to have all of those people and all that capacity to make it as a real resource for society. And I think that's something that drives me. I've been there, I've been sitting with them. I really believe that they have a place in society. Today they don't. Today they don't have a place. But I can see that place coming. Another thing is that we meet a lot of civil servants that are really tired on the top-down, new public management and so forth. And they say that, we see these opportunities, but we can't take them because we are stuck in our specific silo, our specific top-down structure, and they are so frustrated. And we have more and more of them coming and asking for a change to get the kind of reflective practice back, where they can take the initiatives, where they can take these opportunities that are coming. So I'm still quite hopeful, but it's two forces at the same time.
What we are doing is taking place in a welfare state of Sweden, a withering welfare state, but still a welfare state. And I think that's very important as a context. It would be. This is nothing that can be exported as is, but this is part of our conditions that there's still a belief in the possibility of a welfare state, threatened as it is. And I'm thinking that what we contribute with are stories that challenge this welfare state in the direction of forthing democratic issues. So, for instance, the design for social innovation things that we're involved with are typically questions of creative and collaborative communities. And then becomes the question, are there new ways to organize work and social life in neighborhoods? When it comes to commons that Anna's talking about, we're looking quite a lot into maker spaces of different kinds and see, could they be part of an alternative economy? Or maybe not an alternative, but at least something that challenges the business as usual. A third field which is very important when we're engaged is in new forms of public engagement, of new forms of people to raise their voices, to engage in different issues. So these three areas, challenging business as usual, is one thing that we can do. And how far that'll come, I don't know. But I think it's really in the tradition going back to the turn of the last century when the trade unions grow and there's in different social moments. So it's continuing that tradition, not giving up the welfare state. That's one thing. But we also have colleagues that say that it's not only peak oil, it's peak everything, and crisis might be unavoidable on a global scale, and especially when it comes to ecology and economy. And so Anders Imsen, a colleague that we've worked much together with, he's instead now focusing on how we prepare for after the collapse. So, and that's an area that we have not been working very much with, but seems to be quite important. I mean, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. And that's the kind of venue that we have not done very much along so far, but I think that'll come along as well.
We have a course that's actually running now in design and social innovation, and at the moment it's the only course that specifically have that title. And the dilemma is that the step between that course and previous course is quite huge, because suddenly a lot of, as you say, the traditional framings are opening up so much. So I think it's really hard for many of the students. We have to prepare them step by step. And we also have need to, which something we do in our research, that we work a lot with urban studies departments, with social medicine, with a lot of other disciplines. And we need to get a lot of other research disciplines into this as well. Because design is not enough to prepare these students.
It's also important, in this course we work a lot, students work with our research projects, so we push them out in meeting stakeholders and working closely with stakeholders, and this is really important because they get this sense of the complexity. I think it's particularly important for even other kinds of maybe courses to push out students outside the university in trying to getting them in contact with external stakeholders and having this kind of understanding of the complexity that establishing relationships and working with others entails.
And I think maybe the course works similar to when you go to driving school. They have this exercise, when you drive on ice. And the purpose of that exercise is not to become a better driver. The purpose is actually to open people's mind that this can really be dangerous. And I think it's, in a way, it's the same. A lot of the stuff they do, it's so complex and they actually fail a lot. But then it turned out they're also very happy because, I really, a lot of them state that they really learn something. It's really, the real world out there with all these complex problems. And I think that in itself is very important to get this mindset. Yeah, you can't just solve everything easily. You can't just go out there with your own top-down idea. And just that mindset, I think, is important to equip them with.